The neon lights flickered over the narrow alleyway, casting long, sharp shadows against the wet pavement. It was a quiet corner of Tokyo, the kind of street where the hum of the city felt distant. A group of men in black suits, unmistakably part of the Japanese mafia, stood clustered near a doorway, their voices low but confident, radiating menace. Then he appeared, Steven Seagal alone. Calm, eyes scanning, movements deliberate but unhurried. He didn't speak. He didn't hurry. He simply walked, every step measured, every breath controlled. To anyone else, he could have seemed like a lone tourist, but they knew better. The mafia noticed him immediately. One of the younger men stepped forward, a smirk forming on his face. "This one thinks he can walk here," he whispered to his companions. They laughed softly, a chilling sound in the empty street. The tension was subtle, but it vibrated through the air, sharp enough to make a passerby hesitate. The young thug made a move, leaning in with a mock bow, a gesture meant to intimidate. "Old man," he sneered, "you shouldn't be here." Steven stopped. He didn't flinch. He didn't even raise an eyebrow. Just a slow, steady glance in the man's direction, and in that instant, the smirk faltered. Something in Steven's eyes, calm, precise, unyielding, made the man pause, if only for a heartbeat. The laughter died. His companions froze. Even the distant hum of the city seemed to falter for a second. They had thought this was an easy moment, a casual display of dominance. But the balance had already shifted, subtly, silently. Then the first mistake happened. The young thug reached forward, intending to shove. Just one hand, one push. And that was enough. Steven moved not like a storm, not with rage, but like water flowing, redirecting, controlling. The man stumbled back, shocked, his arrogance shattered in seconds. The others watched, stunned. Something they had underestimated in the blink of an eye had revealed itself: absolute control. Quiet but undeniable. In that split second, the rules changed. The streets, the shadows, the city, they all seemed to acknowledge it. No one would dare underestimate him again. Have you ever seen someone so calm, so in control? That fear started spreading around them before a fight even began. The city streets of Tokyo looked peaceful at first glance. Neon signs buzzed softly, steam rose from small food stalls, and the faint chatter of pedestrians drifted through the air. Vendors wiped counters. Delivery bikes weaved in and out of the alleys. Everything seemed ordinary, almost too ordinary. Steven Seagal walked calmly, his eyes scanning every detail. Every flicker of movement, every shadow, every sound registered. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. To the casual observer, he could have been a tourist, someone taking in the city at night. But the mafia knew better. The group in black suits lingered nearby, pretending to check their phones, leaning against walls. Their leader, a tall, sharp-eyed man with a tattoo peeking from under his collar, watched Steven with careful interest. He whispered instructions to his men, convinced the approach was under control. Confidence radiated from them like a shield, masking the tension that simmered just below the surface. Steven paused at the edge of a small square, taking in the environment. He noticed the subtle indicators of the mafia's presence, the way a group of pedestrians moved slightly around the men, the way a street vendor's hands trembled as he wiped his cart. Nothing was overt, but nothing escaped him. Meanwhile, the mafia whispered among themselves. One joked about the easy target. In the shadows. Another pulled out a phone, subtly filming, thinking they were documenting a simple intimidation. The leader smiled, eyes glinting with arrogance. "He doesn't even know what's coming," he muttered. But Steven didn't approach recklessly. He didn't rush or react. Each step was deliberate, controlled. He positioned himself to see every angle, every escape route, every potential threat. He was alone, yes, but the streets were not chaotic. It was precisely this calm that made danger so deceptive. Even as ordinary life carried on around them, pedestrians passing, neon lights flickering, distant trains humming, the undercurrent of tension was undeniable. One wrong move from the mafia could change everything. And Steven's presence alone made every casual glance, every laugh, every subtle gesture feel loaded with consequence. In that moment, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Nothing had happened yet. But everyone watching, pedestrians, vendors, the mafia, felt the invisible shift. Calm could be more dangerous than chaos, and quiet could speak louder than rage. Does calm always mean safety, or can danger be hiding in plain sight? The mafia had been watching Steven for minutes, convinced he was just a solitary man in a foreign city, an easy mark. Confidence radiated from them, their arrogance filling the narrow alley like smoke. Then the first mistake happened. One of the younger men stepped forward, just a little too close, eyes glinting with mockery. He spoke, his voice loud enough for Steven to hear. "You think you belong here, old man. Tokyo is not for tourists like you." The words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. Other Mafia members chuckled, thinking this would provoke a reaction. They expected anger, an overreaction, a stumble. But Steven didn't flinch. He didn't tighten his fists. He didn't even shift his stance. His gaze was steady, measured, unshaken. A subtle pause fell over the group. One of the men whispered to another, "Why isn't he moving?" But no one dared step closer. Something about the calm in Steven's eyes made them hesitate, even if they couldn't name the reason. The young man smirked, thinking the pause was fear. He leaned in, louder this time. "I said, you don't belong here. Do you understand?" The street seemed to narrow around them. A few late-night pedestrians glanced briefly, sensing tension they couldn't understand. The neon lights flickered overhead, shadows stretching unnaturally across the wet pavement. Steven shifted his weight slightly, not in aggression but in readiness. Every muscle was controlled, every nerve alert. He didn't speak, but the silence spoke volumes. The message was clear: underestimate him at your own peril. Then the arrogance of the Mafia backfired. One of the men, trying to show bravery, reached forward as if to shove Steven, testing the waters. It was a minor movement, but enough to signal that the line had been crossed. Steven's hand twitched slightly, a motion almost imperceptible, but precise. In an instant, the man stumbled back, barely off balance, eyes wide with shock. Lauder died. Confidence cracked. The leader's sharp eyes narrowed. This wasn't going as planned. They had expected a reaction, yes, but not this level of control, this calm authority. The tension escalated quickly. Other Mafia members shifted, uncertain, sensing the subtle power in Steven's stance, the way he absorbed the threat without raising a hand. A split second of hesitation is all it takes to change the course of events. The young thug realized too late that this was not a man to provoke. Pride and arrogance collided with experience and discipline. For the first time, the Mafia members felt something they weren't used to: doubt. And doubt can be more dangerous than any physical attack. Have you ever seen someone so in control that the people trying to intimidate them start doubting themselves? The alley was quiet now, but the air was thick with anticipation. Steven Seagal stood alone, calm and still, his eyes sweeping over the group of Mafia members before him. Each man assumed they had the upper hand, that they were testing an ordinary person. They didn't realize that in Seagal's world, every situation was calculated, every movement considered, every second an opportunity. He felt the weight of the moment, but not with fear, with awareness. Years of training had taught him that power was not in reaction, it was in control. A single misstep, a single rush of anger, could escalate into chaos, and chaos was exactly what the Mafia wanted. They thrived on unpredictability, on intimidation, on forcing people to react before thinking. Seagal's mind moved rapidly, silently weighing options. He could end this in seconds, he knew. A few precise movements, and the situation would be neutralized. But that was not the point. It had never been about proving strength. It was about discipline, about protecting himself while maintaining authority. The young thug who had spoken first was still recovering from his stumble. Pride had returned, a flicker of arrogance. But it was fragile now. The others glanced at each other, waiting, expecting some sign that Seagal would respond, that he would lose control. And that was exactly the moment Seagal had been preparing for. He shifted his stance subtly, aligning his body to maximize balance and control. Every muscle was engaged yet relaxed. He observed exit routes, potential attacks, even the smallest indicators of intention in the Mafia's movements. The mind of a master worked faster than any hand could strike. A voice echoed in his memory: discipline over rage, precision over impulse, strength without chaos. That was his guiding principle. And tonight it was more than philosophy, it was survival. He could see their misjudgment clearly now. They expected him to respond with aggression, with anger. They expected confrontation born of instinct. But he had something far more powerful: calculated restraint. Seagal took a slow step forward, just enough to draw attention, to assert presence without threatening violence. His gaze fixed on the young thug, who now felt the subtle pressure of authority without understanding why. The air shifted again. The tension was visible, almost tactile, hanging between them like a physical barrier. Then, he spoke. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a steady, controlled voice that cut through the silency. "I don't think you understand what you're doing." The words weren't a threat, they were a warning. A single sentence that carried more weight than any shout, more impact than any punch. And in that moment, Seagal made a decision he would act only if absolutely necessary. Everything else would be control, precision, and observation. The Mafia members, however, were not thinking clearly. The young thug's pride surged again, masking the flicker of doubt. They were about to cross the line one more time, to test the limits of his patience. And in that split second, they didn't realize the consequences of their arrogance. Steven's inner conflict ended with clarity. Strength is not measured by speed or volume, but by restraint and awareness. Tonight the lesson would be taught, not with chaos, but with authority. If you were in his shoes, could you stay calm while danger pressed close? Or would pride and fear force you to act too soon? The silence stretched for a heartbeat too long, the kind of quiet that makes every movement sound louder. Then it happened. One of the younger Mafia members, fueled by arrogance and misjudgment, stepped forward and lunged. Not a calculated strike, just a push, a challenge meant to provoke fear. Seagal didn't flinch. His body moved almost imperceptibly, shifting with precision. The thug stumbled, not violently, not in panic, but enough to lose balance and stumble backward, his eyes widening in shock. The others froze, whispering to themselves, unsure how to respond. It was the first real test, and the message was already clear. Seagal's control was absolute. Every minor attack, every shove, was met with redirection, balance, and strategy. Nothing chaotic, nothing unnecessary. Just measured responses that made the aggressors hesitate, even reconsider their next move. But hesitation doesn't last long among the reckless. The tallest Mafia member, the leader, stepped forward now, his presence commanding the street. "Do you think we're afraid of an old man?" He spat, confidence masking his creeping unease. His men flanked him, circling, attempting to trap Seagal in the narrow alley. Seagal shifted slightly, his stance low but controlled, ready for anything. Each movement was deliberate, designed to counterforce with minimal effort. The leader advanced, hands raised as if to threaten. He shoved forward, testing Seagal's reflexes. And again, Seagal responded with subtle precision, a step aside, a guided redirection that sent the man stumbling without serious harm. The group exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't going as planned. Their confidence had been built on assumptions, on underestimating the quiet man before them. Each calculated move by Seagal was dismantling their arrogance, their sense of control. Then came the moment that would change everything. A younger, more reckless member rushed from the side, attempting a surprise strike. But Seagal anticipated it. With a smooth pivot, he redirected the momentum, causing the man to crash into his companion. The alley echoed with stunned gasps, the sound louder than any fight. Seagal's calm eyes scanned every angle, every potential attack. He didn't strike again, didn't escalate unnecessarily. Yet the psychological impact was immense. The Mafia, for all their numbers, realized that raw aggression was useless against someone who mastered control. One of the men, trembling, fumbled with a knife. Pride urged him to act, but fear rooted him in place. Seagal's gaze met his, calm, unwavering, and silent communication past hesitation is fatal. The man's hand dropped slowly, the blade forgotten. The leader, finally understanding that brute force was failing, tried one last intimidation. He shoved Seagal hard, expecting retaliation. But instead of anger, Seagal's response was fluid, almost effortless. The shove redirected, balance shifted, and the man found himself off-center, humiliated more by the precision of the counter than by any damage. The alley fell into uneasy quiet again. The Mafia members glanced at one another, doubt replacing arrogance. Their confidence had been shattered, not by brute strength, but by control. Each had learned in mere seconds that underestimating Seagal was a mistake they would regret. Even as the adrenaline settled, the tension remained. The young men had survived the immediate confrontation, but they had felt the weight of authority, and one thing was certain: the old man standing before them was not to be provoked lightly. If you were in this alley, facing him, would you attack or freeze? Could you remain calm under such pressure? The alley was tight, shadowed, and tense. The Japanese Mafia members, once full of confidence and swagger, now hesitated, uncertainty etched across their faces. Their leader, tall and imposing, adjusted his stance, realizing that sheer numbers and brute force would not win tonight. Every instinct screamed that he should dominate, but instinct was not enough against the calm, calculating presence of Steven Seagal. Seagal's eyes scanned the alley, mapping every angle, every potential threat. His body remained relaxed yet ready. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush forward. Each subtle movement projected confidence, authority, and unyielding control. His opponents could feel it, even if they couldn't explain it. The air seemed heavier around him, charged with the invisible weight of mastery. "Step carefully," Seagal said quietly, his voice cutting through the silent tension. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to be heard. The words were a warning, a chance for them to reconsider. Some of the younger men froze uncertain, while others forced arrogance over their rising fear. Pride can be blinding. The leader made the first move. He lunged forward, fists raised, attempting to regain control. Seagal didn't flinch. He moved with fluid precision, sidestepping, redirecting the force, and using the attacker's momentum against him. One step, one pivot, and the leader stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the lack of resistance. He expected chaos, rage, aggression, but instead met calm, measured authority. A second Mafia member rushed in from the side, swinging a metal rod. Instinctively, the others followed, thinking coordinated attack would overwhelm him, but Seagal anticipated each move. He guided the first attacker's arm to the side, shifted his own balance to avoid the rod, and in one smooth motion, disarmed the second man. The metallic clang of the weapon hitting the alleyway echoed like a warning. The remaining members glanced at each other, doubt spreading like wildfire. Their coordinated intimidation had crumbled, dismantled by subtlety and control. Seagal's mastery wasn't in brute strength, it was in anticipation, redirection, and restraint. Every step, every slight movement, reinforced his dominance without causing unnecessary harm. One of the younger men, desperate to save face, charged recklessly. Seagal didn't even need to strike. A simple guiding motion, a gentle push and pivot, sent the attacker off balance, stumbling into the wall behind him. His companions gasped, realizing that aggression alone could no longer dictate the outcome. Even the leader now understood the truth. He raised his hands slightly, not in surrender, but in caution, trying to gauge Seagal's next move. Pride still burned in his eyes, but uncertainty had replaced arrogance. The realization was clear. Underestimating this man was the gravest mistake of their lives. Seagal took a slow step forward, his presence alone commanding attention. "You still have a choice," he said evenly, his voice calm but unmistakable. "Leave now and nothing else needs to happen." The leader's hand twitched, debating defiance, but the lesson had already been delivered. Every member of the group had felt it, the undeniable authority, the precision, the control that turned fear into respect. One by one, they retreated, stumbling over each other in confusion, humiliation, and awe. The alley returned to quiet, the echoes of the confrontation lingering like a ghost. Seagal remained where he stood, calm, breathing steady, surveying the retreating Mafia. There was no celebration, no laughter, only a clear demonstration of power without chaos, discipline without rage. For the few who had witnessed it, the alley's shadows, the distant pedestrians, even the neon lights themselves, it was unforgettable. The strongest presence in the alley had spoken, without raising a hand unnecessarily. And the lesson was clear: control is more powerful than aggression. Restraint commands respect in ways brute force never could. Have you ever witnessed someone so in control that even a group of dangerous men backed down? Would you have the courage to stay calm in such a moment? The alley was quiet now, but the tension lingered, a residue of the confrontation that had just unfolded. The Japanese Mafia members had retreated, their pride shattered, their arrogance replaced with a sober realization they had underestimated a master. Every step they took away from the alley was filled with a mix of fear, confusion, and reluctant respect. Steven Seagal remained standing where he had positioned himself, calm and composed. His breathing was steady, his posture relaxed yet alert. He didn't chase them. He didn't gloat. That was never the point. The lesson had already been delivered. Control, restraint, and precision had done what aggression could never achieve. The streetlights above flickered softly, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. A few late, night pedestrians who had paused to watch from a distance now whispered among themselves, eyes wide with disbelief. Some had secretly recorded the encounter on their phones, though they hadn't realized they were witnessing a display of strategy and discipline rather than a fight. In those quiet moments, it became clear the impact of the encounter wasn't physical. It was psychological. The Mafia had come to intimidate, but in the end, they were the ones intimidated, not by weapons or violence, but by mastery, by calm authority. Seagal began walking down the alley slowly, each step deliberate, leaving the scene as quietly as he had entered it. There was no spectacle, no fanfare, just the natural authority of someone who understood the true meaning of strength. Every eye that had followed the confrontation now traced him in silent admiration. By morning, videos of the encounter had started to surface online. Not because of a dramatic brawl or flashy violence, but because of the lesson it conveyed. People were drawn to the subtlety, to the discipline, to the way one man had neutralized multiple threats without ever losing control. Comments flooded in, some in awe, some analyzing every move, and many inspired by the power of calm and precision over brute force. The lesson was clear and universal. Strength is not measured by how loud you are, by how quickly you react, or by how much chaos you can create. True power lies in the ability to protect yourself, command authority, and remain disciplined even when faced with overwhelming provocation. For those who had been watching from a distance, or for those seeing the footage online, it was a reminder that real mastery isn't about aggression. It's about patience, strategy, and the confidence to act only when necessary. The Mafia had learned it the hard way. The world around them had witnessed it silently. And Steven Seagal had walked away, leaving nothing but a quiet example of unparalleled control. Even in retreat, the Mafia members carried a lasting memory. They had underestimated a man who didn't need to fight to win. And that memory would serve as a warning. Arrogance meets its match when it faces true mastery. Seagal's calm exit left the alley transformed. The neon lights, the shadows, and the wet pavement had witnessed something rare: authority expressed without chaos, power exercised without violence. It was a quiet lesson in human control, a demonstration that even the most threatening situations could be handled with intelligence and poise. The story didn't end there. For viewers, there was anticipation, an understanding that more lessons, more moments of mastery, and more demonstrations of real strength were waiting. If you believe real strength is about discipline, control, and precision, type respect in the comments. Which part of this encounter amazed you the most? Would you have stayed calm under such pressure, or would fear have taken over?